Ken Curtis was the man that people watching television really liked and trusted. He was a little rough around the edges, very loyal. Had a sharp tongue, but he was also very kind. Ken Curtis became very famous for playing Festus Haggen on the show Gunsmoke. The way he made people laugh felt real. His loyalty to his friends was strong. He helped make the show feel more real. When he was not playing a character on the show, walking around the streets of Dodge City, Ken Curtis had some quiet anger and old disappointments that he kept to himself. When Ken Curtis got older, he talked about some people in Hollywood who he thought about a lot. These were people he really respected. He also had fights with them, and there were some people he never fully forgave, like the 5 Hollywood figures who haunted him. What could make a man kind as Ken Curtis turned bitter is a side of Ken Curtis that not many people got to see. Ken Curtis was known for being a person, but there must have been something that made Ken Curtis feel this way. It is interesting to think about what could have driven Ken Curtis to feel bitterness. Ken Curtis was born Curtis Wayne Gates on July 2, 1916 in Lamar, Colorado. He grew up in a strange place for someone who would become a star. Ken Curtis spent his childhood in a jailhouse. His father, Dan Gates, was the sheriff of Benton County. The family had an apartment right above the county jail where his father worked. Ken Curtis remembers hearing the metal doors shut, people walking around in boots, and the quiet talk of prisoners when he was a kid. These sounds were around Ken Curtis when he was growing up. His mother, Nellie Sneed Gates, made food for the family and the people in jail. Ken was a boy, and he would see the tough men say thank you to his mother through the bars. This showed Ken how to be kind and fair. He learned that it is good to be in charge, but to be nice to people. These things helped make Ken the person he is, and also the person people see when they watch him. Growing up during the Great Depression was really tough for Ken. The Great Depression was a hard time. Ken found something that made him feel better. That was music. He would sing at school and at church, and people would gather around to listen to him. His voice was very deep. It was nice to listen to. People liked listening to Ken sing. He was good at singing. Even though Ken was good at singing, he did not think he could be a famous singer. His parents wanted him to get a job so he would have money. They wanted him to be a doctor. So Ken went to Colorado College to learn about medicine. He was there for 2 years. He was not happy. Ken felt like he was doing something that he did not want to do. He felt trapped in a life that was not really his life. The Great Depression was still a time, but Ken knew he had to make a change. The music was something that he just could not get out of his head. Music kept calling him. He really wanted to make music. So he decided to leave school and do what he really loved, which is music. Music was his passion. In the 1940s, things started to look up for Ken Curtis when he joined Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. This was a deal because he had to fill the spot that Frank Sinatra just left. That would be scary for anyone. Ken Curtis stayed calm and did a great job. Tommy Dorsey taught Ken Curtis a lot about being disciplined and professional. It was actually Tommy Dorsey who thought Ken Curtis should change his name. After that, people over America heard Ken Curtis sing, especially when he started singing with the Sons of the Pioneers. Ken Curtis became really popular. His voice was everywhere. Songs like Room Full of Roses and Ghost Riders in the Sky were really popular. That is why Room Full of Roses and Ghost Riders in the Sky made him a big part of the nation's music. He stayed true to his small-town values when Room Full of Roses and Ghost Riders in the Sky were being played everywhere. Ken's ambition eventually pulled him toward Hollywood. He did a radio show called Chuck Wagon Jamboree. This show had music and humor and stories that taught people something. It was like a preview of the kind of person Ken would be on. In 1945, Ken started acting in westerns. He caught the attention of a director named John Ford. John Ford saw something in Ken. Ken was a cowboy, and he was very genuine. Ken worked on some famous movies like Rio Grande and The Quiet Man and The Searchers. Working with John Ford was an honor for Ken. The first person on Ken's list is James Arness, the star of Gunsmoke. He was a big deal. Ken thought James Arness was very good at what he did. He liked that James Arness worked hard. Ken did not like that James Arness never seemed to think of him as a friend. James Arness always wanted to be in charge of Gunsmoke. He did not like to share that with anyone, especially Ken. Number 2, Milburn Stone, who played Doc Adams. This guy was really strong-willed and stubborn. Milburn Stone frequently had disagreements with Ken about the scripts and how time he got on screen. Even though they did not always see eye to eye, Ken still showed he cared when Milburn Stone got sick. This just goes to show that when Ken was upset with Milburn Stone, he still treated him like a person. Milburn Stone and Ken had their differences. Ken never lost sight of what was important. Number 3, John Mantley, the show's producer, and John Mantley did not like Ken to be anything than a sidekick. John Mantley refused to make Festus a bigger part of the show or give him money. The arguments between John Mantley and the people who worked on the show got really bad because of money and the kind of stories they wanted to tell. This made a lot of people very upset. It stayed that way for a long time, leaving lasting wounds because of the fights over John Mantley and Festus, and the way John Mantley treated Festus. Number 4, Amanda Blake, who played the role of Miss Kitty. The friendship between Amanda Blake and the other people on the show started to fade as Festus became more popular. People began to talk about Amanda Blake being jealous of Festus. Even though nobody ever said anything about it loud, the tension between Amanda Blake and the rest of the people on the show was really obvious when they were all together on set. Number 5, Dennis Weaver, the Deputy Chester. He was a deal. People always compared Ken to Dennis Weaver, even though they never actually worked together. This really bothered Ken for a time. The fact that people always measured him against Dennis Weaver was frustrating for Ken. That feeling of being in Dennis Weaver's shadow never really went away. When Gunsmoke ended in 1975, Ken was really tired. He felt proud of what he did on Gunsmoke. He kept working at a slower pace, and he was happy with smaller roles and appearances on other shows. In 1987, CBS said they were going to make a Gunsmoke reunion movie. A lot of fans thought Festus would come back for the Gunsmoke reunion movie. Ken said no to being in the Gunsmoke reunion movie after they offered him a salary that he thought was not good enough. He did not say no because he was mad. He said no because of principle. Ken did not want to be treated like he did not matter. For the first time, he felt good about standing up for himself and saying no to the Gunsmoke reunion movie. When the cameras were not rolling, Ken finally found some peace with his wife, Tori Connolly, who he married in 1966. She was not a part of the Hollywood scene. That was a good thing. Tori Connolly helped Ken see that family life and simple things can be really great. Ken became a stepfather to her kids, and he liked living a quieter life. Ken was very open about his views on politics, and he never said sorry for what he believed in. He thought it was really important to stand up for what you believe in, and Ken believed in his political views. Ken Curtis' story is really about being strong and quiet. He went to Hollywood with the values he learned in a town where his dad was the jailer. He kept these values with him when he performed in music halls, when he worked on movie sets, and when he was on television. Even when he became famous, Ken Curtis did not forget what was fair. He was upset with some people. It was not because he thought he was better than them. It was because he felt like people did not appreciate him, even though he had been working hard for a time in a business, where it often seems like power is more important than being loyal to people, like Ken Curtis. Ken was really professional at the time. He stayed calm, did not let his feelings get the best of him. Ken is a human person, and that is what makes him so great. Ken remained professional through it all. The 5 actors really got to Ken because they reminded him of painful things that happened to him. James Arness was like the boss who was always in charge and kept Ken in his place. He was a star, and Ken felt like he was always living in his shadow because of the badge he wore. Milburn Stone was an actor who had been around for a long time, and he liked to do things his own way. Sometimes this caused problems because Ken believed that they should work together to tell a story. Amanda Blake was a friend, also a rival in a quiet way. Their friendship was strained because things were changing. She was getting more popular. Dennis Weaver was like a reminder of how Ken measured up to others. Even though they never actually worked together, Ken could not escape being compared to him in people's minds. The 5 actors, James Arness, Milburn Stone, Amanda Blake, Dennis Weaver, and the 5th actor all represented wounds to Ken. John Mantley was not an actor. He was a very important person behind the scenes. He showed us the truth that sometimes people think your work is more important than you are. John Mantley was a figure, and this was very clear. People valued what John Mantley did. They did not value John Mantley as much. These people had an effect on Ken Curtis' personal life. They did not do this by fighting with him or causing scenes. Instead, they did it by making things uncomfortable for him over time. They made him feel frustrated, hurt his feelings, and made him decide what was important: being proud or being angry. In the end, Ken Curtis came out of it with his name still in place. He was happy because he knew he had done what he thought was right when it really counted. Ken Curtis had stood up for himself when it mattered the most. To Ken Curtis, what remains is not the grudges, but the legacy. Festus Haggen lives on as the heart of Gunsmoke, a character built on loyalty, humor, and moral clarity. Ken Curtis may have carried quiet wounds, but he left behind something far stronger: the respect of generations who saw truth in his performances. And that, more than any role or rivalry, is what truly defines his place in television history. Ken Curtis died peacefully on April 28, 1991, when he was 74 years old. They spread his ashes over the plains in Colorado, near the place where Ken Curtis grew up as a kid, right above a jail. Over time, people forgot about the things, but Ken Curtis is still remembered for what he did. Ken Curtis was not trying to be famous. Ken Curtis wanted people to respect him. With all the problems in Hollywood, Ken Curtis is still one of the most loved Western stars on television. Do you think Gunsmoke would have been the same without Festus Haggen? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about Hollywood's hidden legends.